I just want to let you know I have a lovely co-host with me today, Monica McCubry from our division. She'll be kind of tending to the chat. She'll be tending to the chat if you have questions. So make sure as you have questions throughout the presentation. I'm a really kind of informal presenter. I so prefer being in person with folks, obviously. So if you have questions as I am chatting, I'm going to be talking about a lot of information today. Please pop something in the chat and I'd like to discuss it with you and answer it as we go along. I think that's about it. Are we ready to get started? Okay. All right. So thanks so much for joining us today. I'm going to be speaking about aligning practice with developmental needs in environmental education. A little background about myself briefly, for those of you who might not know me. Again, my name is Amber Schiltz, Wildlife Education Program Manager. I've been with Game and Parks for a few years. I have a wide variety of background and interests. I would say the theme definitely is I like to be outside in nature myself for all the benefits, but also my big passion in life is connecting people to nature and the great outdoors, for sure. I have a bachelor's of science in fisheries and wildlife and a master's of arts in teaching biological sciences. So we're going to be talking about environmental education today and how we can have the best methods and curriculums and lessons and all the things to meet kiddos, to meet children and students where they are in their kind of cognitive developments. Before we do that, let's define environmental education, because I'm not sure what everyone's background is. Today, some of us might be coming to us from the formal education world or the informal or even the science world. And so just to kind of start on this slate, this is the definition from the North American Association of Environmental Education. And they say that environmental education is, I'll read a little bit, a learning process that increases people's knowledge and awareness about the environment and its associated challenges. It develops the necessary skills and expertise to address those challenges, and it fosters attitudes, motivations, and commitments to make informed decisions and take responsible action. So those are some very lofty goals there, and you can see that to achieve something like this multifaceted goal of it's the knowledge, awareness, the values, the attitudes, all these things, you're going to need really a holistic approach, especially throughout the life of a child. So how is it achieved? How is this lofty goal of environmental education achieved? Well, to be the most effective, environmental education needs to be designed to match children's developmental needs and their interests and their abilities and their learning styles throughout their life. And so it really isn't a one size fits all when it comes to environmental education and immersing students, children, and people in the outdoors and in nature. Why is this? Why is this helpful? You know, that it's not a one size fits all. Well, the way children learn is really completely different from adults. I don't know if any of you have experience either with teaching or having your own children or surrounded by children, but you can see this evidence all the time. They think differently, and it's pretty amazing. It's because for the first few decades of our lives, human brains are rapidly changing and developing. The first, I would say 20, 25 years, our brains have to just do a huge amount of growth. And that's both in our thinking patterns, our social relations, all these different things, all the facets of life. And so as that changes, the way we think changes. So at each stage of our cognitive development, children have different ways of thinking and relating to the world. And these different levels of thinking really have a direct effect on how they learn. So as educators, what can we do? What can we do to understand that? And what can we do to adjust how we teach, how we educate? How does it inform environmental education? So for environmental education to have successful outcomes, we need to meet them where they are throughout those different stages. And by understanding what each stage of development really actually feels like to the child, I really try to think about what it feels like to be a child in each of these stages. What does the world look like to you? That's what I try to focus on. When we do that, we can learn how they experience the world. We can meet them there, and then we can do what we need to by guiding them to construct greater understandings of the natural world along the way. So we're really not trying to get 5-year-olds to think like adults and rush them through the process of childhood. We are trying to understand, how does this 5-year-old think? We're trying to meet them there and then successfully give them building blocks so that eventually when they are adults, they can have those kind of attitudes and values that we want. Any questions so far? Okay. All right. So I'm going to get into a little, there's definitely theory in the things I'm going to be speaking to. I'm not calling each theory out specifically. I don't want to get too much in the weeds with this. I want to make sure it's applicable to us, but I have so many resources. If you're interested in anything in particular, at the end of this, in that email, I can send those resources along the way. Okay. So let's think about, what does a world feel like and look like to babies and toddlers? So 0 to 2. So they're basically a giant, they're just a ball of sensory experiences. They feel and understand and think about the world literally through their senses. Everything is a sensory stimulation to them. I'm sure that we've seen, many of us have seen like babies, they're constantly like chewing, putting things in their mouth. They're, as much as we think they're doing that to give their parents a fright, they're doing that because they're trying to explore things through every single sense. They're also doing a lot of practicing their motor functions. They got this cool body and they just were, born and trying to figure out how they move through the world. So they're practicing, they're manipulating objects. They're doing a lot of sensing and manipulation of the world around them. As far as their identity, or what does it feel like to be a baby, they understand the objects around them are separate from themselves. And that's about it. They don't necessarily have they don't know who they are quite yet. They're trying to figure that out. So they know the objects are different than them, and then that's about it. They're genetically wired for survival. So they're born, wired to survive, but also it's a paradox because babies, in fact, in the animal world, human babies are one of the most dependent infants there are. And so they are absolutely dependent upon their caregivers and their social structure for survival. And so their job is to learn how to get their needs met by others. That's like their number one job. And so those early relationships are very important, of course, as caregivers and parents, but also when you're talking about, if you're engaging with this age group, it's about warm responses. It's about kindness and caring and things like that, because they're building trust right now. That's essential. They're trying to figure out how and what to trust. So reflexive abilities for forming those relationships. The big benchmarks of this stage is object permanence. So if you might have heard this word before, and if you haven't, basically what this means is that an early, like a very young baby, like maybe 3 or 4 or 6 months, the only thing that exists in their mind is things that are immediately around them. Yesterday doesn't exist, tomorrow doesn't exist, something in the next room does not exist. They have to see it and it exists, right? So they do not have object permanence. If you take a toy away, if you hide it, it no longer exists. That's why peekaboo is such a lovely game for this age, because they think you're actually disappearing, and it's silly. But towards the end of this age group, they begin to understand that objects do still exist if they don't see them. So you can see this if you have a toy and maybe closer to a 2-year-old and you're seeing it and then you hide it under a blanket, they will try to search for it then, because they know, okay, just because I can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. This seems like an interesting thing, but this kind of object permanence is an essential building block for every other stage that we move through here. Any questions on that? Again, this is a lot of information, so please let me know if you have any thoughts, okay? All right, so now we're moving through, we're a young child, we're 3 to 7-ish, that kind of pre-K age. And now our world has completely opened up because the emergence of language has happened. We see and understand the world now through symbols, not just if it's physically in front of me, it's the only thing that exists, but now we know a picture of an apple, in a book represents an apple in my kitchen. And then we can communicate. So they're able to understand language now. They're able to communicate back with their caregivers and their surrounding people in their life. And that's just a whole new world of learning and development. They're understanding the world through patterns. Humans are just prime pattern seekers. That's how we learn about the world. So they're increasing their capacity for observation. They're observing so much and they're questioning so much. It's like a golden year of questioning. I don't know if anyone has any young kids, but the questions are nonstop. Lots of times that can maybe be tiring to caregivers or teachers. And I totally understand that. However, knowing what's happening in their developmental world, I think it's so cool, the questions that young children have. And I try to foster that through programs or even through my own parenting with my own child. Egocentrism is a big one in this stage. When we call it a fellow like adult, oh, someone has a lot of ego or egocentric, often we're saying that as an insult, which I understand that makes sense because maybe that's more childlike behavior to not worry about others, right? But this is a developmentally appropriate characteristic right now. Their entire world, they are the center of their world. Their world is opening up a little bit, but they don't understand that other people have different preferences or other people have those individual thoughts as well. So egocentrism is a big one, and that really informs some of the programs that you can do. They're using imitation and imagination to learn about their world. They're building this amazing metacognition skills, which is thinking about thinking, which is another incredible building block for further learning as they grow older. And they do that through play. So a child's work in this age group is play. That should be their full-time job, is playing. They attribute human qualities. Again, they're egocentric. So what I'm feeling, that apple might be feeling, or my dog might be feeling sad, or that chair, I bumped it, maybe it's sad. They attribute these human qualities to everything around them as well, because that's how they think the world is. So it's animate and inanimate things. And then the benchmark of this stage, like I mentioned, is that symbolic thought. They can have mental representation now. And what that means is if I ask you all right now to close your eyes and think about your favorite meal, there might be a variety of what you're thinking, but you're probably picturing something in your mind. I'm picturing tacos, for example. If I ask someone before this stage to imagine an apple, that wouldn't really be able to do that. But now in this stage, we can have mental representation. Another really cool benchmark to learning. As we are getting older, and you can see each layer, each kind of stage we go through, they're not taking away the thinking that they had, they're only adding to those conceptual frameworks, which is really important to remember. So we're older children, we're now understanding concrete objects and events, and we can understand these concrete objects so well that we can sort them, and we can categorize them, and we can notice comparing and contrasting between different things. We are continuing to build on how we know the world through play and just deeper exploration at this point. So we're diving deep into some things we're really curious about. As far as our identity, we're moving more towards that sociocentric. And so what that means is we learned a lot of empathy in that previous stage, hopefully. But we know that we have an individuality, but we also understand that other people have their own individuality as well. They have their different preferences as well. Just incredibly active, inquisitive, just absolutely driven by curiosity and need to explore every single thing, every idea, every place. And every experience leads to learning. Children, the way their brains are developing at this age, especially the younger ages, they can passively learn. They can walk into a room and be learning something because that's what they're primed to do. Whereas as we move towards adults, we have to work a little harder at the learning aspect. So they use trial and error to experiment with problem solving. They have to kind of like work things through. They can't hold a lot of concrete, like mental representation objects in their mind at once just yet. However, if they see it, they can draw it, they can mess with it, then they can problem solve through actually doing, which is a really important piece that informs education. A benchmark of this stage is logical thought. So now, if you've ever heard people say, don't argue with toddlers, it's not going to be a logical argument. That's true, and it's no offense against toddlers, it's just where they're at. But we're starting to move into logical thinking now at this age, which again, another incredible building block for more learning to come. Any questions? I feel like I'm going really fast.
No questions yet, Amber.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so now we move to that adolescent stage. A lot of things are happening, of course, both to brains and bodies, but really to that cognitive development as well. A lot of things, the world is opening up now, right? So We've moved through object permanence. We can think about things in symbolism. We understand concrete objects. Now we're going to be thinking abstractly. We can have abstract reasoning, which is really important, especially in a lot of like the way that we ask people to think about the world through science requires abstract reasoning, requires deductive reasoning. This is when we can really kind of hit on those almost science thinking in a really deep way. So that abstract thinking goes beyond the here and now. They can think about future consequences. They can think about in the past. They can kind of manipulate those ideas mentally. They're capable of deductive reasoning. They increase their ability to think systematically and symbolically. So it's just expanding their world. They continue, as far as their identity goes, they continue to discover like their self, what's their role in society and community and their family, what is their role? That's a really important kind of struggle through here, but they're also understanding how they are connected to their greater society and how they might have an impact as well. Ability to think hypothetically and think about moral dilemmas. This is a really big one, and it's something my son is 5 right now, and going through this presentation, I know I take for granted. I often ask him, what do you think should happen? You know, like if someone doesn't follow a rule or something like that. And he kind of struggles with answering. Sometimes he's like very hardcore black and white punishment, and it doesn't really match like what we're talking about. And it makes me understand, you know, you don't really have that skill to discuss moral dilemmas until about adolescent age, which is really important to think about as educators. They have the ability now to problem solve without trial and error. They can think things through. They can hold multiple mental representations in their mind at once. If you ask them, for example, what would have happened to the United States if instead of like Europeans starting to move here from the east, they moved here from the west or something like that. Like you can kind of ask them those hypothetical things and they can kind of think things through. And of course, the benchmark of this stage is abstract reasoning and really thinking about meaning to things. Now, what do things mean? Okay, so I kind of zoomed through and condensed some theory, some psychology 101 here for you. So now how are we going to talk about it in terms of environmental education? And what I want to think about is how does each stage, how does it inform our environmental objectives at each of those stages? How do we speak their language and meet them where they are in those thinking patterns, right? For successful environmental outcomes or environmental education outcomes. All right, so that first stage, babies and toddlers. So a developmentally appropriate objective here in terms of environmental education is we need to focus on sensory experiences and helping them develop their comfort and their sense of safety in the natural world. So they need to feel safe. They need to explore it a lot with their senses. And how can we do this? Now, I just want to mention, there's a list, there's a lot of text here, and this is not a comprehensive exactly how. There's lots of other ideas, but I just wanted to kind of get us thinking a little bit about what that might look like. All right, so babies and toddlers, our number one objective in this stage, develop their comfort in the natural world through sensory experiences. So how can we do that? As providers or caregivers, whatever role you find yourself with this age group, it's really critical to provide natural sensory experiences safely. Lots of natural objects, things to touch, feel, smell, hear, and see. Touch, feel, and smell, and I would say taste are so important to this age group. Of course, as adults, most of the time, what we're paying attention to in our world is like hearing and seeing. But all of those other senses that we sometimes forget about, it's so important for that holistic sensory experience. Make nature and wildlife part of your story time. Include nature and natural system themes, animal themes in other things that you're doing, like reading books and things like that. Create spaces and opportunities for children to safely explore the sensory stimulation of the outdoors. Again, this age is just it's a sensory exploration machine. So where can you find the greatest sensory stimulation? In nature often. It has a lot of stuff happening, and so it's really helpful for their development. Model, so they're, again, remember, they're looking who to trust and how and what. They're looking to the caregivers, they're dependent. So that means us as caregivers or teachers or providers, whatever that may be, it's really important how we interact with it, with outdoors, right? They're looking at that to understand the world. So we need to make sure we're modeling how to safely and gently engage with animals, like if you have education animals or dogs or things like that, engage with outdoors. Loose parts and unstructured play is really important, providing those natural objects for babies and toddlers to safely explore and manipulate. If you have something that you don't want to break, don't give it to this age group, right? Set them up for success, not failure. So give them things that they can really manipulate. And then allow for creative expression, music, puppet shows, play with stuffed animals, things like that is really important to this age. Okay, so now we are, we're safe, we feel safe in the outdoors, we feel safe in the natural world. And so what is happening next with our next stage of development? So for young children, our main objective is going to be fostering that empathy for the natural world, fostering that relationship that children have to the natural world and that they understand they are a part of it. And so that would be the main goal and objective of this stage. And how do we do that? Again, here's some more. If you think, if like this age group is your expertise and you have an idea that I don't have on here, please put it in the chat. I would love to hear that and see that. So one of the ways, allow opportunities for unstructured play and movement in natural spaces. This is really important. This age group, again, I'm mainly talking about cognitive development, but if you're talking about like their motor skills development, being outside and unstructured and being able to climb and play and explore and balance, it's so important for that development of the child, and it helps them be more comfortable outside. Providing opportunities to cultivate relationships to animals. This is actually like specifically important in this age group when we're thinking about when we're creating and fostering our values of what we find to be valuable, what we love and care for. This is a really critical age. And so even if it's outside looking for bugs or looking for birds or anything accessible to you. Also, I want to speak here and say, I know that in the greater kind of scientific world, anthropomorphizing, which is attributing human attributes to animals, is a no-go. In both of my degrees that I received, you know, we talk anthropomorphizing, we cannot do in science communication or in science research, which I absolutely understand. At this age, the way they think is they assign human attributes to everything around them. And so I would actually say the anthropomorphizing, you know, talking like seeing a snake that might be scary and saying, look, he looks so nice, he wants to smell you. That's actually helpful at this stage. Sometimes there's a fear that if I anthropomorphize right now, they're going to grow up and be 30-year-olds who, you know, who attribute human attributes to everything around them. And that's not the case. That logical thinking will come. Anthropomorphizing at this age is okay. All right. That might shake some stuff up, but I'm just going to say it. Model curiosity, wonder, and awe and empathy. Again, they're looking to the caregivers, the teachers, and the providers on how to safely engage or what to care for or what to value. So the more that we can model that, it's really helpful. And they can see that this is something that adults value. And so I should too, okay? Support the child's learning through making connections to their previous experience and ask lots of questions. They ask a lot of questions at this age. Ask a lot of questions right back. What do you notice about this? And if they say something kind of incorrect, you know, which happens all the time, instead of correcting them, just say, oh, how did you come to that? What makes you think that? Get them to be kind of like thinking about their thinking instead of just trying to correct them if they get a fact wrong, which is totally okay at this stage. Follow their curiosity and allow what they're curious about to drive that learning experience as much as you can. I know sometimes it's hard in more of the formal classroom settings, but as much as you can, if you notice your children or your students are interested in something in nature, try to match what you're trying to teach about to what they're interested in some way, because you're going to get greater learning outcomes. Our role is as facilitators is at this age is to just nurture the sense of wonder and children naturally have for their natural world. So children are born inquisitive and excited and in awe of nature. And so our goal is basically to foster that and not squash it, which is it's a really exciting goal. Okay, so we feel safe and comfortable in nature, and now we love nature. We have that value for it. We have that relation to the natural world. Now, what's next in this stage for older children? Just furthering and really exploring the natural world. That's the main objective of this stage. And this is the stage where you can introduce ecological principles and phenomena for sure. It's just make sure that we're doing it through exploration. And so, so for example, while fostering their curiosity, introduce those ecological principles by encouraging investigation and exploration of the phenomena that they're experiencing firsthand. It's just so much more helpful. If you remember, we don't get abstract reasoning and thinking until 12-ish. And so as much as that's how adults think, so we can say, imagine this, or what if we're in the rainforest, or what if we could teach through abstract here, but it's going to be more successful if we can teach phenomena that's happening right in front of them, that's happening outside in their schoolyard or in their backyard or their local park. Allow opportunities for unstructured play again and movement in natural spaces, a lot of climbing and playing and exploring again, and appropriate outdoor risk taking. So it is actually, and that's my next point, it is important for children to be able to take risk in the outdoors. One second. Okay, I'm just going to pause really quick because I see Melanie has a comment and I want to include that because it's a good one. Melanie mentioned, in my experience, sometimes children in later stages have missed being able to feel safe in nature, and educators may need to backtrack and begin there. Oh my gosh, Melanie, thank you so much for saying that. I have noticed that quite a bit as well. And I think it's really important that we don't stick to, oh, they're in this age group, so we better move on to this. It's really important to understand, and that's why relationships are so important, to get to know the children, to understand where they are, especially in their comfort with natural world. So that's excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Melanie. Help them assess risk, right? So instead, if they're climbing a tree, instead of, if you want to jump and say, oh my gosh, get down, that's dangerous. Just kind of notice how they're climbing, pay attention to it. How are they feeling? And ask them how they're doing, and then just let them know, okay, notice where your hands are, notice where your feet are, because they do need to kind of take a little bit of risk in outdoor play in order to be able to move through the world successfully later as adults. Focus on acknowledging the connections they're making to their world rather than jumping to point out incorrect facts. I see this often, and again, no shame here. It's all well-intended adults trying to make sure that we're teaching children the right things. But if a kid says a turtle can leave, I hear this a lot, a turtle can leave its shell. A turtle can leave its shell. Instead of saying, that's not true, why don't you just kind of, that's what they have in their conceptual framework. So often I ask, oh, what would happen if the turtle left their shell? And why do you think that? What's your evidence for that? And then we work through that their backbones are fused. I have them feel their own backbone. And the backbone is actually attached to the shell. And then I ask, so if it's attached to the shell, do you think that they could actually leave? And then they come to the conclusion, this is just an example, that they're not able to. And so instead of just correcting right away, you're taking away opportunity for learning there. So just make sure that you're meeting them where they're at, even in their incorrect connections that they have made. Foster and encourage their developing observation skills. This is key. That's your role as an educator right now, is helping them develop those skills. Ask those guiding questions. Help them to think and reflect. Support their developing sense of place. So focus your explorations on their local nature in their neighborhoods and communities and greater bioregions, as much as it's so exciting to learn about the rainforest and the oceans and stuff. And I do think that's important. They don't have a sense of place for that. And so they need to make sure we need to be focusing a lot of our time on understanding like what's in their greater community as far as the natural world in that way, because remember, it's concrete right now, not abstract. So they need to be able to actually see and feel and experience these places in order to care about them. Okay, so that last stage. So again, going back, we feel safe, we feel comfortable in nature, we love nature, we have a relationship to the natural world, we know our role in it, we have explored it, we've dived deep, maybe we've learned more about ecological principles, the amazing science behind what makes nature so cool. So now And only now can we start to take on some bigger challenges, that's social action and stewardship. Okay, that's the objective of the adolescence age group through environmental education. So here, our role as educators, we need to be able to foster connectedness and belonging to the natural world through social action and through thinking about those types of things. So for example, while learning about systems and processes, try to, again, provide opportunities for students to engage directly with those systems and processes when possible. Really empower students at this age to participate in their learning, thinking like scientists, exploring, observing, questioning, investigating, being part of the science that they're learning about, collecting data, analyzing, reflecting. It's good to focus on developing the understanding of interdependence at this stage. So how are our human systems created? And we understand how natural systems are, a little bit about it, from the first stage, and how are human systems created? How are they dependent on each other? How do humans rely on nature to survive? And also, how do humans impact the natural world? So this is a really critical kind of piece right here, to be able to move to, sustainability thinking and solution-driven teaching. Center environmental education in place, again, by learning about environmental challenges in their local community or their greater bioregion, allowing students to dive deep into their individual interests. Again, it's always going to be beneficial. If you have a student who's just is so specifically interested in the aquatic world for some reason, in fish, instead of gearing everyone like, nope, we're talking about insects right now. If someone is just truly interested in fish in whatever kind of capacity or classroom you have, see how you can still meet the needs of what you're trying to learn, but they can do it through the lens of studying fish, if that makes sense. It's really helpful to learning. Analyze and investigate ways that perceived values and uses of natural resources change over time, and how people value wildlife and nature differently, and why is that? Different cultural, societal, or economical systems. It's really important. Remember, at this stage, we can think about moral dilemmas a lot. We can have a lot of abstract reasoning. We can think hypothetically. So we are ready to be able to dive into these kind of things. And also remember, at this stage, we're learning who we are and what our role is in our family, our classroom, our community, our society. And so that role really plays into some of these things that you see, kind of exploring that role. Okay. So getting to the end here, I just want to revisit again what that definition of environmental education is, because we talked a lot about the different stages. We kind of went more into psychology and learning how kids at different ages have different thinking patterns. So now we're back in environmental education. What's that look like? What does that all look like here? I thought we could kind of take an example and see how you could try to meet this goal eventually, but what would that look like at different stages? So again, I'm going to say just some ideas I had. This is not a prescriptive list. If you have other ideas, please put them in the chat as we work through this. So if we have one specific goal of environmental education to increase knowledge and awareness of our food systems and to develop the stewardship attitudes for the health and biodiversity of the natural world our food system relies on. So that's a lofty goal again. What might that look like through each stage? It's probably a heavy subject for babies, but where can we start? Okay, so for babies and toddlers, remember it's sensory and comfort. So some example ideas I had, provide opportunities for sensory experiences, of course, in the outdoors, water, soil, plants, bugs, things like that. Make food or snacks an activity in itself. Remember, everything they're doing is just experiencing the world through their senses. So food can be a learning opportunity. You can model noticing, oh, what is that flavor, or what does that taste? What texture is that? What color? Things like that. And read stories centered around natural systems and or our food systems as well. As we move through this, for younger children, some things we can do to try to eventually meet this goal: plant seeds, both food, like so vegetable seeds, like maybe even in a little cup where they can see it growing and they can see the little roots and stuff, or flowers as well. Observe the growth. Play with water, play with soil, play with flowers. Remember, it's that exploration through play here. Go on bug hunts. This is my favorite activity in the entire world, and I will still do it well into my 80s, hopefully. So look for pollinators specifically. Maybe you can start talking about pollinators and the idea of pollination and how they help get us food. Forage for food. You know, maybe you're finding berries or even apples, or you can forage at a farmer's market as well, and you can see where our food comes from. And I put this one in here: incorporate gratitude in every lesson if you can. And that sounds like maybe a silly thing, but what I mean by that is, as you're going on that bug hunt, or say you're in a garden somewhere and you notice a bee, and you're starting to put in those seeds of ideas that bees help pollinate and they help give us tomatoes. And so remember, it's empathy and connection. What you can be doing is you can say, thank you, bee. Thank you for helping us grow our food. And kids will pick up on that gratitude and that connection. Or when it rains, instead of being sad that we can't go play outside, often I've said to my own child, thank you so much, rain, for helping grow our flowers. And now he says that all the time too. And so just kind of practicing that gratitude is really important in this age group. Okay, older children. So remember, we're exploring and we can really start to dive into some ecological principles here. So what can we do? We can explore natural environments. We can encourage observations of animals and plants, really guiding those questions to foster reflection. Where did the animal get its food? What is that squirrel eating? Where did that nut come from? You know, where does our food come from? And start having lessons revolving around those questions. Explore pollinator habitat. Maybe you can go to different gardens. Maybe you look at like a lawn versus a garden, and you notice that there's no bees in this lawn or something like that. You start to have those conversations and those explorations. Grow a garden together, cook and enjoy meals from the garden together, whether that's like in your own home or within your students or something like that. I think that growing something together is really important, at least for this particular goal. And then lastly, as we move through adolescence and we're thinking about this particular goal, lots of different ideas here. These are just a few I had, but grow a school or community garden together, pollinator and or vegetable garden, or maybe both. Again, remember that learning their role in society and community is important, so that plays in here. Explore local sustainable agriculture places and practices, so let them kind of explore, ask questions, meet people who are growing our food. Maybe they want to participate in a pollinator-centered community science project. I think community science is excellent for this stage of students, and it really hits on a lot of their developmental needs. Or maybe they can investigate local challenges and create a service learning project. What if they notice that there's a lot of food waste in their own school? And so maybe they investigate and they research how to reduce that. And then you have this whole kind of learning process through that as they're taking action. Okay, any questions? All right, one other goal I had as an example, but this time I want to just kind of explore with our participants if you have any ideas. Now that we've moved through a lot of this, no wrong answers, just brainstorming. But what would it look like for this goal? Increase knowledge and understanding of regional biodiversity and understanding of endangered species conservation. Okay, so what would this big lofty goal look like through each stage? Any thoughts? Any thoughts? How would we start to lay the building blocks for something like this in babies and toddlers? You can unmute yourself or throw it in the chat. This is a tough one for babies and toddlers. Some folks might be typing, but one thing I'm thinking about, oh, okay, great. Michelle said books with different animals. That's great. I think sensory experiences with animals or animal parts, that's good. Very good. Yes. You're getting you're getting where we're going here. Just, yeah, feeling safe around different animals. Having those sensory experiences, I think that's about the most that you can do right here. What about younger children? How would you foster empathy and connection as a building block to getting this goal later? Monica said live animals are always awesome. I absolutely agree. I think education animals and ambassador animals play a really pivotal role in early childhood education, to be able to see up close, anthropomorphize that snake. And now I'm not afraid of snakes because this one was so cute and sweet to me. I think that's really important, probably for young children. Monica, thank you. Anybody else for young children, how we would do it? Storytelling focused on animals. Very good. Yeah, that's good. What about the next stage? How would we achieve this goal in older children? Through that exploration, and now we can get a little bit into ecological principles. Modeling behavior so that children realize that so many animals should be treated with respect and not fear. That's excellent. I think modeling is a really important and almost underrated kind of aspect of teaching. Jackson said spaces that protect these animals, like zoo. That's good. So maybe taking a trip to a zoo and understanding more and being able to see them. It's great. Annie says play as animals together. That's awesome. Imagination needs. That's excellent. Yes. Very good. And then of course the last one, how would we try to achieve this goal through adolescent age? Now we're getting that stewardship value. Now we're doing that social action. Now we are developmentally capable of understanding some of the environmental challenges that we face, because we are also equipped with the agency to do something about it. Whereas before we did not have that agency, if that makes sense. Any ideas on this age group? Oh, that's good. Melanie said community science projects with endangered species. Excellent. Hannah says plant a pollinator garden. Excellent. It's very good. Awesome. Thank you guys for your participation. I appreciate going through that exercise, just kind of getting us thinking a little bit. Okay, so kind of closing up. What are some of our environmental education challenges? Okay, one second. Someone said, oh, Annie said, make a puzzle of their own region. Oh, what are all the pieces? I love that. That's an excellent idea. I hope you do that, Annie. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, environmental education challenges. So we've learned a lot about the different stages of thinking patterns in students. We've also learned what their needs are and how we can meet them there now with environmental education practices. So what are some of our challenges that we still face? I like this quote here: knowledge without love will not stick, but if love comes first, knowledge is sure to follow. I think that's really important to think about. So here's the kind of the skinny, okay? Adults that create environmental education programs and opportunities with the very best intentions, and I have been there, by the way, myself, absolutely, I've been there. We can often be limited by our own adult perspective on our own interests, our own priorities, and our learning abilities. And why is that a challenge? This can lead to us trying to impart knowledge of and responsibility for the natural world before children have even been allowed to develop a loving relationship with it. So it's really important to think about. And I think I want to mention, and I can't remember who said that comment too, is just because you have a 12-year-old in your program doesn't mean that they have been, at least for their relationship to the natural world, doesn't mean they have moved through all those stages successfully. And so even if you have older kids in your program, they might not have been able to develop a loving relationship, with nature so far. And so that still should kind of be your focus more so than the knowledge and responsibility. So I appreciate that comment. So why can this be challenging? Children first develop, as we've learned, their emotional and their affective values of nature before they're able to cognitively develop their logical, their rational, or even their abstract perspectives and understanding of the natural world. So when we ask young children to deal with problems that are beyond their cognitive abilities and they're beyond their understanding and their control, especially, we risk them developing anxiety, phobia, or even apathy towards the natural world. Which I don't know about you, but that looks like the exact opposite of what the goal of environmental education is, right? So by understanding the different ways in which children can experience and learn from the world, we can foster their love and connection to the world first, and then we can lay the foundation for those stewardship values they'll carry throughout the rest of their lives. I just like, there's a few quotes here that kind of sum it up. Childhood has its own way of seeing, thinking, and feeling, and nothing is more foolish than to try to substitute ours for theirs. We cannot protect something we do not love. We cannot love what we do not know, and we cannot know what we do not see or hear or sense. I think that's really important quote, speaking to, really teaching about place. All right, so these, I just want to let you know all the resources I've used for this presentation. And again, if anything of interest is here, please reach out and I would love to share those resources with you. A really, really great resource is the North American Association for Environmental Education. They actually have these awesome manuscripts of the guidelines for excellence, and they have a lot of this research-based stuff there, among other resources. So in closing, I just want to ask you to reflect if you'd like to share in the chat or on voice. What are the challenges that you face in scaffolding, going through those things, environmental education? So you can share that, or if you want to share, how can your understanding of different developmental stages improve your own practice as an educator? Or if you have any other questions, these are just some prompts, but I'd love to hear from you on either of those reflections. Hannah has a really great comment. She said, I found that art projects are a great tool for fostering a love in nature and allows the children to play and explore their curiosities. That's excellent, Hannah, I agree. This has given me a lot to think about in terms of developmental needs at every stage and how I can think differently about it and adapt. Oh, awesome. Thanks, Hannah. I'm glad it's helpful to you. And I agree, yeah, art can be like a language of love and expression, absolutely. So that's a really good piece to all this. Anybody else? What challenges do you face in this, or how might these kind of understandings help improve your own practice? Oh yeah, absolutely, Melanie. That's hard. Lack of access to the natural world in the public school environment, for sure. For sure. I know that there are ways, but I know that often teachers are not supported. You have to almost go out of your way to somehow bring the natural world into the classroom. But there are ways. And Melanie, if you have any specific questions about that, I know our division has a lot of resources to help you do that, by the way. So you can reach out and I can share those with you. But that's an important challenge. Anybody else? Any other thoughts or questions?
Amber, Annie had one too in the chat right above Melanie's.
Oh, thank you.
One?
Oh, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, Annie says challenges. We have 45 minutes as informal educators. Experience, facts, how to balance. Oh, that's a really good one. That's a tough one. I have been there. I've been an informal educator for about over 10 years, and I know that's really hard. How to balance that? Well, again, think about the age group and think about our role as educators. And I know it doesn't feel right when we're not only dispersing facts, but our role as educators is to spark a curiosity. And so hopefully that spark will lead to more of a fire for them to be burning and learning more, even when they leave your 45-minute program. So if you can at all try to focus on kind of inquiry learning, sparking their curiosity, guide them in exploration, ask them questions, experience new things within your programs. And of course, they're going to learn through that. And I'm not saying never say a fact. That's not what I'm saying, but really try to focus on what those needs are. Whether it's fostering connection and empathy, whether it's the exploration, or whether it's that kind of social action. But it is a good challenge, Annie. It can be done, but I feel like it's a lot easier if you can develop relationships with them, even through a week or something at a camp. So I understand that. Any other questions? What if we have a mixed age group? Oh, that's excellent. That's a good question. And I've had that a lot before. as well. So if it depends on your setting and what you're thinking, and also anyone else chime in if you have some thoughts on these questions, because I know there's probably a wealth of experience and knowledge here. But something that I try to think about with mixed age groups is I have almost think about it as centers or like different activities or different things that a toddler can gravitate to this, or maybe a 7-year-old is going to maybe do this. And so maybe having a few different kind of activities within the parameter of wherever you are, so for them to be able to go to the activity that will be best for them. That's something. Also, when you're doing, like, for example, oh yeah, I like that, Michelle, could also have older kids teach and guide. That's really good. Yeah. If you're doing something kind of an outdoor exploration, whether you have, because I've done that before, like family hikes, you can have like 2-year-olds all the way to grandparents. And as long as you have different tools to use, like bug jars and nets or magnifying glasses or binoculars, you can experience, you can all get that really incredible experience. And then each individual will just learn what they can with their age, if that makes sense. But that's a good challenge and a good question. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Oh, okay. All right. Well, I just want to thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope to see you next month at the next Lunch and Learn. I do think it's going to be a good one, learning about the mental health benefits of being outside, being in nature. But I hope this gave you something to think about. This is one of my favorite subjects, thinking about thinking and thinking about students and what their needs are. So if you have any other questions or comments or thoughts, this is my email address, and please feel free to reach out to me. I like nerding out about this stuff. Wonderful. Lots of good reminders. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. How will you share the program and resources? So yeah, thank you for that reminder, Annie. I'm going to email everyone tomorrow with this recording. And then in that email, I'm going to share some of the basic resources that I used here today that I find really helpful for your continuation of learning if you're interested in these subjects. Okay. Awesome. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thanks, Amber.
Thank you.